Hey guys, welcome back to Libby's Lounge, Patreon edition, where we are recording the unofficial audiobook for the Assassin's Alliance. We are on chapter 32, so let's dive in. Chapter 32, Maureen. Zach's screams followed them home, the ringing in Maureen's ears a constant. He'd given nothing, as she expected, his ghosts consuming him before he was any good to answer. The most he'd given up was that Maureen was Mike's only ex-girlfriend and that he'd seen her meet with Peter Hale alone on many occasions. All was easily explainable. She was a legacy asset. Friendly conversation and pillow talk gave them an insight to what Halo was doing. She was a glorified walkie-talkie until about 6 months ago. But manipulating the sin from the outside was almost as tiring as from the inside, and her head dropped forward several times in the back seat as the cab drove them home. After the third time she jerked herself awake, Seamus pulled her against him, and she dropped her head to his shoulder. "How are you feeling?" he asked in a low voice. "Honestly, just tired. I should be feeling more, but don't take them out yet," he whispered back. Maureen's gut flipped and he continued. "You've mellowed so much in the last few years, I forgot how ruthless you used to be right after your sin trip." Maureen's heart pounded in her chest, chasing away the sleep, and she sat up, staring at him through the darkness. "Do you know how hard I worked to pack that away?" He nodded. "And Andrew will piece you back together when we get home. We have to get home for that to happen." Maureen wanted to argue, but he was right. She couldn't afford to let anything distract her, and the painful memories of June's death kept her focused. They lapsed back into silence for the remainder of the drive, Zach's torture replaying in her mind. And although she was afraid to admit it out loud, she loved how it felt to control his experience, to craft his trip, to give only what she wanted Rosemary to hear. The lights in their villa shone into the street when they pulled up, and Seamus removed his gun from its holster. Seamus paid the cab driver and waited until the taillights disappeared from view to approach the house. The TV could be heard before they reached the door, and Seamus signaled for a perimeter check. They peered into the kitchen window first, finding serving dishes filled with food sitting on the table. But when they moved to the living room window next, they spotted a silhouette sitting on the couch and pulled back, leaning against the building. "Ready?" Seamus mouthed. Maureen looked down at her sling, not feeling ready at all, but nodded. She reached out to open the window and froze as a silhouette materialized behind Seamus. Seamus's head tipped forward with the pressure of a gun, and he dropped to his knees, hands rising automatically. Deft fingers plucked the gun from his hand. "Sloppy," the man said, stepping into the light of the window, and Maureen let out a sigh of relief. Geoffrey's bright green eyes danced from behind his glasses, his dark brown hair combed tight to his head. He was taller than them both, taller than Rufus, although more muscular. He removed his gun from Seamus's head and reholstered it. "Don't ever fall on the wrong side of the legacy. Hunting you down would be too easy." "What the fuck?" Seamus said, returning to his feet and stepping away from the Reaper. "That's not even funny." "Wasn't supposed to be," Geoffrey said, and handed back his gun. His eyes roved over Maureen's sling, but he didn't mention it. "Come on. I made dinner. Senior wants an update." The smell of garlic bread pulled a growl from Maureen's stomach, and she washed her hands before sitting down. Seamus moved more slowly, eyeing the array of food with suspicion. "How long have you been here?" "A few hours," Geoffrey said, scooping a helping of potatoes onto his plate. "I couldn't track you down, and I was hungry. Figured you'd come home eventually. Eat." Maureen didn't need to be told twice and piled her plate with food. During the late-night trainings with Francis, Geoffrey had always brought them food. Maureen had assumed it was a personal chef hidden somewhere in the Institute, but no. Geoffrey just enjoyed cooking. "This is delicious," she said. "I was starving. Thank you." Geoffrey nodded. "Your distress message was received." Senior was worried, especially after the last legacy mission went south. Maureen's appetite suddenly waned. "What happened?" she asked. "It looks like a team failure, but Senior doesn't believe it. He thinks someone sabotaged them. He was hoping for an update from you." "No update," Seamus said before Maureen could answer. She looked over at him and raised an eyebrow. But he ignored her. "The contact didn't show. We're regrouping and trying again." "He didn't mention you were in a sling." Geoffrey nodded at her and took another bite of food. "Oh, I fell," Maureen said lamely, and Seamus kicked her under the table. "Down on the dock," she continued, "tripped by some little dog. It's just a strain." "Really?" Geoffrey pulled a glass vial out of his pocket, and Maureen's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, throat suddenly filled with dread. It was the empty sedative container. "Seems like overkill for a muscle injury." "Mind if I see the rest?" he asked. Blood pounded in her ears, and she looked over to the cooler on the counter. She could refuse, but she also knew Geoffrey could force her to open it if he wanted. "Sure." Her legs shook beneath her, palms sweating as she pressed her thumb to unlock the top. As she opened it, a stabbing pain pierced her shoulder. She screamed and grabbed at it as she dropped to her knees. Before she could catch her bearings, her head slammed into the ground, another cry launching from her. Geoffrey towered overhead, His fingers grabbed the collar of her shirt and pulled down, exposing the bloody bandage on her shoulder. Seamus lunged to help her and found himself at home on the ground beside her, Jeffrey's foot slamming into his chest. No update? He asked, raising his eyebrows. I think being shot is a worthy update. He straightened up and stepped over her, reaching the cooler. She watched through watery eyes as he counted the vials. You're missing a vial of sin and an antidote. Where are they? He looked down at her, but she was still trying to catch her breath. He pulled out his gun and squatted beside her, pressing the tip of it to the tip into the floor next to her. There is some fuckery afoot in the legacy, and this does not look good for you. The sin, Maureen. Where is it? What could she say? That she tortured Zach with it? He'd want to see to him, and they couldn't do that. Or maybe she could. He was Francis's Reaper. She could trust him. But when she opened her mouth, doubt crossed her mind. He was in the room when Francis warned her off, and so was Elijah. If Francis wanted her to trust him, he wouldn't have mentioned him. She swallowed hard. I dosed myself, she whispered, blinking the tears from her eyes to see him more clearly. He smiled and then laughed. You what? Maureen dared a glance at Seamus, the fear in his eyes pushing her forward. I dosed myself. Seamus gave me the antidote. Why in the hell would you do something like that? Maureen licked her dry lips. The ability to manipulate the sin had been kept a secret. Francis was afraid of what Elijah would do to her if he found out, but they had talked about her experimenting again, but under the watchful eyes of him and Charlie. Maureen was just waiting for the newest version to be ready. That's a Francis question. Senior isn't here, he snarled, and I'm starting to think he might not be wrong about a traitor in his mists. We're not, Seamus said. We would never. Jeffrey shot a glare, silencing him. Maureen tried to keep her dinner down while her stomach churned. Do you know what my job is? He asked. To protect Senior? Maureen whispered. To protect him against all threats, even the ones he can't see himself. He moved the barrel of his gun to Seamus's chest. I can manipulate the sin, Maureen shouted, her eyes locked on Seamus's. He shook his head, but it didn't matter. Being the witness to his murder was not on her bucket list for this trip. I can manipulate the sin, she repeated, looking up at Jeffrey. Francis told me to wait, but I wanted to see if the newest strain was as easy as the last. You can ask him. Jeffrey cocked his head, and Maureen dared to look back at Seamus. Why? He mouthed at her. It was too much to try and explain, so she just mouthed back, I'm sorry. Senior is unreachable for the next 48 hours, Jeffrey said, straightening up. A wave of relief washed over her, and she let out a long breath. But since I can't confirm or deny, he moved to the counter and pulled out the remaining blue vial, giving it a small shake. You're going to give me a demonstration. It was as if she'd already been injected, fear freezing her in place, the voices of her dead straining to whisper in her ear. No! Seamus launched himself at Jeffrey. Maureen forced herself to move and snatch Seamus's leg, tripping him before his fist could land. Jeffrey stepped back, a look of disinterest crossing his face, and Seamus glared at her. I'll do it, she said, eyes on Seamus first and then on Jeffrey. She'd heard a lot about Jeffrey's loyalty to Francis, and one thing she was positive of, if he thought you were a threat, you were dead. You need proof? Easy day. Jeffrey's smile sent chills down her spine, and she clambered to her feet, a heaviness sitting over her. Seamus stood too. You don't have to do this, he said. Senior wouldn't want you to. Well, he's not available to take a call, so I'm making one. With a heavy heart, she scanned the room, looking for the best place to do it. This would be best done somewhere else, where the screams won't have the authorities called. I cleared the block when I arrived. We're alone, Jeffrey said. Maureen and Seamus exchanged looks. They certainly hadn't been alone this morning. Why? Seamus asked. Precaution, Jeffrey offered. Maureen swallowed around the knot in her throat, unsure how she felt that he had cleared the area for a simple check-in. Okay, well, we'll need an IV kit and... No. Jeffrey shook his head and held up the bottle. No special places and IV kits. Take a seat. Have you ever even seen sin administered? Maureen asked, her entire being trembling. There are precautions to take, and the antidote needs to be administered before the toxin hits the brainstem. I know. Sit, he commanded, pointing at the couch. Her first sin trip had been unexpected. The cold had carved a path to her heart, her ghosts ripping themselves from her mind. But this time, Maureen knew what to expect. The ice slid through her veins, tracing the familiar path to her heart. She couldn't hold the scream as it pierced it, though, and her entire body shuddered. The sharp tang of metal filled her mouth as her teeth chattered uncontrollably, slicing into her tongue, and she spit the blood at Jeffrey's feet. How many times have you done this? Maureen asked. Or am I your first? Maureen, Seamus warned, and she looked over to him. Jeffrey had tied him to a chair, a black eye that was still swelling graced his face. Most people can't even form a coherent thought in the first few minutes, Jeffrey said in answer. So he'd been to a few. Maureen doubted he'd been to as many as her, though. She looked back at him, the anger in her gut tethering her to the moment. I didn't know Francis authorized the use of sin. There is a lot you don't know, Maureen. He checked his watch, and she knew it was only a matter of time before her dead would start to appear. Her pulse quickened at the thought, and she fought to slow it down. Last time she had only had 4 dead to contend with, but this time she had dozens. A flicker in the corner of her eye grabbed her attention, and she regretted looking the second she did. Half-Face materialized from the shadows, his skull still cracked open. He didn't scare her this time. She'd met much scarier adversaries since him, and had killed them all. She set her shoulders and smiled at him. Hey, fucker, she said, trying to regulate her breathing. He didn't respond, just took a seat on the edge of the armchair and looked down. She looked too, even though she knew better, and her adrenaline spiked. June's body lay at their feet, her chest rising and falling, a puddle of blood growing around her. Maureen, she called out. Maureen's eyes burned, and she refused to blink, letting the moisture obscure her aunt's body. Help me, Maureen. She wished she could, her chest aching, longing to return to that night and change it. She would have let Half-Face just kill her. How did you find yourself here again? Her mother's voice sent a rush of panic through her, the sin racing faster through her system. The dull ache began in her lower back, and Maureen glanced at the clock. 9 p.m. 7 hours. That's all she had to last. Her mother stepped into view, looking down in disgust at June's body, and she took a seat on the coffee table in front of her. Maureen reeled back at the sudden closeness. Miss me? She asked. How can she miss you when she's just like you? Maureen spun around on the couch, Half-Face leaning over the back, chunks of brain matter dropping toward her. She jumped back and fell from the couch beside June. The blood on the floor leaching into her shirt. The ache in her lower back pulsed into a stab of pain, pulling a scream from her. Seamus's voice called her name and angered her to the room. Shh, Jeffrey said. It's more fun to watch them fight their dead first. Maureen looked through her mother and glared at him. Were you going to see how this fucking works? Maureen said through heavy breaths. Or are you just enjoying the show? The smile on his face infuriated her, and she wanted to hit him. Go for it. Freddie materialized beside Jeffrey, and her panic subsided, the friendly face a welcome. You're not strapped down this time. I think you could take him. She'd never wanted to kill him, and if there was a Casper, he was hers. Maureen tried to sit up, but a searing pain in her throat forced her back down. Her mother's ice-cold fingers wrapped around her neck. Her skin burned, and Maureen could feel the blisters appearing. Not yet. You haven't met your new friends. Maureen screwed her eyes up, forcing the words through her now raw throat. If you want answers, Jeffrey, you're running out of time. Oh, we still have time, he insisted. From the shadows, more figures began to appear, her dead slowly filling the room. Some looked perfectly fine, although Maureen could feel the snap of their necks beneath her fingers. Others spilled blood as they crowded in, staining the floor with more pools of sticky red puddles. A spike of pain rose up her spine, hitting her mid-back, and she bit into her lip to stifle a cry, but failed, her back arching in response. She glanced at the clock. It had only been 30 minutes. This wasn't the same as her first trip, and the confidence she felt in being able to navigate it waned. The serum was moving too quickly through her system. A warm hand grabbed her chin, and she looked up from the ground. Seems there's a problem with double dosing, she breathed, realizing her time was much shorter than she expected. The sin has already carved its path. You want answers? We're running out of time. He let out a growl of frustration, but scooped her up off the ground and dropped her onto the couch. Her body shook violently when his warm touch vanished, and he sat on the table, her mother scooting over to make room. If she didn't know the woman was dead, Warren would be 100% convinced that she was real, her body more solid than it had been the last time. What are you doing here? Jeffrey asked. Maureen couldn't hold in her laugh. I'm having a sin trip. You? She asked. What are you doing in Greece? He rephrased. On a classified mission for Francis. Ask me something hard, you idiot, Maureen said. What happened to your shoulder? He asked. I was shot, Maureen said, giving the words freedom to flow. By who? He asked, leaning forward. How are you going to know if I'm telling the truth on that? Maureen asked, redirecting the urge to tell him about Rosemary. I still want an answer, he said. Fine. Maureen said between her teeth. Zach, she breathed. He's the reason I was shot. The reason? Jeffrey frowned. I asked, who shot you? The words crawled up her throat. If she told him who, at least he'd know she was telling the truth, and that she and Seamus were not the enemy here. Jeffrey was Francis's Reaper, his most trusted advisor. Francis might question Maureen on the information, but he wouldn't second-guess his Reaper. She had given her word to Rosemary, but Maureen had sworn loyalty to Francis. And regardless of what Rosemary believed, Maureen knew in her heart Francis would spare her life. Rosemary. She let the name slide out, and the pressure in her head let up. Her mother shook her head beside him and stood, rounding the couch. Maureen kept her gaze on her, trying not to turn her back to Jeffrey either. Not as good as you think you are. Fuck off, Maureen said. He's not my enemy. Sure about that, Olivia? She cocked her head in question. Maureen spun back to Jeffrey. The news Rosemary had shot her didn't seem to shock him. Or maybe she'd missed it, distracted by her mother. A low groan sounded from the floor, and Maureen refused to look, keeping her gaze forward. They weren't real, but her aunt's blood sticking to her back certainly felt real. What else you got? Maureen insisted. Why did she shoot you? She let out a growl of annoyance. You're missing the point. You're supposed to be asking me questions you know the answer to. Why? He repeated. Because I got in her way, she said, forcing all the other answers back down her throat. But she didn't kill you, he stated. Obviously, how are these questions helping you? Did you really dose before this? She lifted her lips in a smile. You know I did. Jeffrey narrowed his eyes and then, as if realizing his mistake, rephrased. Did you dose yourself since arriving in Greece? No, I dosed Zach. His eyes widened slightly. Why? But she couldn't answer, not because she didn't want to, but because the pain raced up her spine again, finding home between her shoulder blades. Her body tipped sideways, and she fell over, the agony too much to bear, and she screamed into the cushions. The ability to move made it worse, and she almost wished he'd strapped her into a chair, too. When it finally passed, Maureen opened her eyes, coming face to face with June. Call your father, she said. Someone needs to know. Maureen shivered too hard to even form a sentence, tears falling from her eyes. Finally, she pushed out, He doesn't care about us. He never did. A warm hand on her back startled her, and she flinched, Jeffrey's gaze coming into focus. Where was that one? She tried to say the word, but she couldn't get it out. Shoulders? He demanded. She nodded, and his features darkened. Then we better finish this quick. He pulled her into a sitting position on the ground and squatted beside her. Why did you dose Zach? Her body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering. He was selling Hale's secrets. Rosemary wanted more information than he was willing to give. The word willing barely made it from her lips, the truth fighting to get a grasp. What information? You suck at this, Maureen countered. Ask me things you know I know so I can lie. Why did Francis pick you to be the liaison for Hale? What? They were getting into dangerous territory. Jeffrey knew why she worked for Hale. He didn't know that she was a Hale, and her control was slipping. One wrong word, and that could change. That's too fucking complicated. Ask a clearer fucking question. Fine. When we were in Hale's office, what information did Senior want from him? Maureen pressed her lips together, the words begging to come out. He wanted information on the graveyard contracts, but he was very clear he did not want the CIA contact. How could she spin it? He wanted access to the graveyard contracts, she said, letting the truth flow to give her space to work. Her father ran them. He was the contact for the graveyard. The devil was always in the details. He was looking for a way to speak to the CIA's graveyard contact. Jeffrey's lips lifted, eyes glowing with surprise. What drink did Mike serve us? Are you fucking kidding me? She snapped. I proved your point. I just want to... She didn't get to know what he wanted. Her body seized, the scream caught in her throat as the pain reached at the base of her neck. Fuck. This was it. No one made it past the second shot to the neck. Rough hands cupped her face, Jeffrey's face coming into view. He'd be pissed if you let me die, Maureen ground out, and let her eyes fall closed. She felt the pull of a tourniquet against her skin and a stab of a needle into her arm. She didn't even open her eyes to make sure it was a serum. Wouldn't have mattered, she couldn't do anything anyway. Seamus's raw voice yelled for her, as if across a cannon. She wanted to tell him she was all right. She wanted to. They're calling it Legacy Inc., Seamus said. Well, Maureen thought it was Seamus. The voice was low and raw. She tried moving, and her body denied the request. She tried again, only her eyes peeling open. They left her on the couch, a pile of blankets piled on top of her, doing nothing to edge the cold away. That was impressive. Jeffrey came into view and held out a glass of water. Maureen eyed it suspiciously. And also a close call. Here, Seamus moved to her side. He grabbed onto her arm and pulled her into a seated position, the warmth of his touch chasing the cold away, and she looked down, realizing he didn't have his gloves on. He pulled his scarred hands back, but she held fast. Please, she said, pulling herself into a seated position. Physical contact. Her cheeks flushed before she could finish the sentence, his tinging pink as well. She couldn't ask that of him. Never mind. What is it? Maureen looked down at her lap. The skin-to-skin connection rewarms the body faster than anything else. I didn't know that, Jeffrey said, holding the drink out to her again. She accepted this time and took a long gulp, her throat burning. Unless you survive it, you wouldn't, she said, looking up at him. Elijah and I have disposed of all the people we've interrogated, except Zach, she said. There's never been a big need for a second dose or recovery procedure. Seamus lowered himself on the couch beside her, his hand wrapping around her wrist. Like this? He asked. Her skin prickled beneath his touch, the cold creeping away from his fingers, and she nodded. So, Rosemary? Seamus was catching me up, Jeffrey said. Maureen took another long drink of water, finishing the glass. She put it on the table and leaned back, her body begging her to stop moving. You believe us? He nodded. You've given me enough to investigate. So what now? Maureen asked. Stick with your plan until I can brief Senior. It's a good plan. He stood and Seamus rose too, the sudden absence of warmth rocking her body. Sorry about the sin trip, he said to Maureen, but I can never be too careful. I'm sure Senior will be pleased to know it works, though. Fantastic, she said, enthusiasm not reaching her words. She closed her eyes and leaned back, letting Seamus escort him to the door. The couch sank beside her. Are you okay? Seamus's hand returned to her arm. No, she said, the echoes of June's cries still in her ears. I'm not. You really can manipulate it, he said, admiration in his voice. Mm-hmm, she said, keeping her eyes closed and trying to sort through the memories. June's voice fell silent, and she focused on her mother. Something she said bothered her. What's wrong? That's your something's wrong face. I think we need to be careful with him, she said, turning to him. His black eye was even more swollen, and he had a split lip she didn't remember seeing. Something my mother said. Your dead mother who tortured me? He asked, the words thick with skepticism. She's just a figment of my grief and guilt. Whatever she says, it's because I believe it, or I know it is truth. I'll bite. What did she say? Sure about that, Olivia? Sure about what? Seamus prodded, and she shook her head, pulling herself back into the room. That Jeffrey wasn't our enemy. Well, he did dose you, so... She nodded, unable to articulate just why that warning felt so foreboding. She had been sure, even under sin, she knew he was doing what was in Frances's best interests. So why would her mother, herself, tell her otherwise? A chill rocked her again, and she didn't think it had to do with her latest trip, although her body was still stone cold. She let out a long breath. I need a favor, she started, her stomach fluttering at the thought. She shouldn't ask him after last night, but it felt like it would be days before her body no longer quaked from the cold. Anything, Seamus said. Don't agree yet. Days ago, there would have been a hesitation, but nothing was ever going to be easy between them again. I need my core to warm up. It feels like my insides are a tundra. Once that's warm, everything else follows. Last time, Andrew was able to rub my back and get things moving. Could you... The silence hung between them, and he bit his lip. He was going to say no. She didn't blame him. Now that they were alone and with no immediate danger, the reality of what they'd done came crashing back. The shame, the guilt. Forget I asked. She pushed herself to stand. A scalding shower might do the trick. His fingers laced in hers, and he tugged, pulling her back down. You just took a sin trip from me. To save my life, he said with a chuckle, and gingerly lifted her shirt. The least I can do is rub your back. The chuckle died in his throat, though, as his eyes fell on the marks on her back. Oh, shit. A thick silence fell between them as he scanned her back, the reality of what they'd done, the impact it would have on the team if anyone found out crashing into her. What if Jeffrey had seen those? What if he dosed Seamus instead of her? What if Rosemary told Elijah what she'd seen? We didn't sleep together, Maureen said suddenly, breaking the silence. Maureen, listen. We may have crossed some lines and done inappropriate things, but even that? I don't remember it. It could have been a random guy I met at the bar for all we know. But we did not sleep together. I very clearly left my mark all over you. No, you're misunderstanding. Maureen turned to face him. The reality that she may have just doomed him to a similar fate as herself, turning her stomach. Every time they ended up on a mission together, he got hurt. Sin deals in truths and facts. It's what we know. If Jeffrey had seen those and asked, I could have spun something because I don't know. What if he comes back? What if Rosemary tells Elijah? Seamus's face paled. If we don't have the memory, it couldn't have happened. There's no proof. But we don't know what we did, so nothing happened, she repeated. If you were asked, it's not, I don't know, but pretty sure I'd recall if that happened. No, we didn't. Deflect and rephrase and agree. Do you understand? He swallowed hard. We're in some shit, aren't we? Yeah, she agreed. I think we are. And that is the end of chapter 32. Maureen and Seamus keep finding themselves in these situations that they're just not good, right? So we're going to dive right into chapter 33 to see what exactly is going to happen with Seamus and Maureen.